It was not only the lofty persons assembled at the Congress who were anxious as to what might be the nature of Napoleon's plans. The event was in everybody's mind. 2 days elapsed before it was known that the emperor had landed in France. The Emperor Francis, reassured as to Italy, then told his daughter that if Napoleon, against all likelihood, was to succeed, he would not allow her to return to France until experience had taught him that he could trust in his son-in-law's pacific intentions and prudence. The first impulses of this monarch were always good, but his good sense and natural loyalty always yielded to the exigencies of politics. Already on March 8th, all the sovereigns who were still present in Vienna had come to an agreement to put the armies of the coalition once more in march. Lord Wellington, accused of having opposed the plan, which had been discussed before his arrival in Vienna, of removing the emperor from the island of Elba and of transporting him to some island in the ocean, said that a campaign against the Emperor Napoleon was about to be entered upon, that he would be taken prisoner and conducted to England, where he would enjoy the consideration and the respect due to the part which he had played in the world. During the 3 weeks which had elapsed since the news of the emperor's departure from the island of Elba had become known in Vienna, the most contradictory rumors followed upon each other. Now Napoleon, having failed before Antibes, where he had presented himself, had re-embarked. According to other versions, he had been received there by General Van Damme. Now he had marched upon Lyon, but had been attacked on his march and had lost 3 pieces of artillery. The provinces through which he passed, so went the report, placed themselves once more under the rule of the Bourbons, after he had left them behind him. Now he was at the head of 6,000 men, and Marshal Soult had joined him. Now Comte d'Artois, at the head of a corps commanded by Gouvion St-Cyr, had fallen in with the emperor on this side of Dijon and had inflicted a defeat upon him. Now Louis XVIII was prisoner at Compiègne. Now Marshal Ney had defeated the emperor. Now he had joined him with the army. According to others, he had joined the emperor alone because his troops had abandoned him, etc., etc. These rumors did not spring from the lower classes. They were the resume of the letters received by 2 emperors and the King of Prussia. The Empress of Austria took care to forward the news which she received, more often false than true, to her stepdaughter. French newspapers were forbidden and were carefully hidden by the Austrian ministers and the ministers of the Allied powers who received them. French news was published in the German newspapers alone. King Joseph, at that time in retirement in Switzerland, did not leave me without news of the emperor's march. He sent me emissaries to acquaint me with the real state of affairs and to put me in a position to counteract the effect produced by the calamitous reports which Fauche-Borel scattered broadcast amongst the members of the Congress and in the city of Vienna, which was the only source whence they reached the Empress's ears. The Empress was so agitated by the rapid succession of events, by the continual alternations of the Emperor's success and failure, that she lost her peace of mind altogether. Careful as I was to inform her of the truth, as I was not always able to reveal to her the source of my information, she was inclined rather to believe the news which reached her from the court of Vienna than to trust in mine. Any piece of news, no matter what it might be, agitated her in the same manner. One day she would say that she would not return to France because she could see no chance of repose for this country. The next day she would say that if the emperor would give up his plans of conquest and would consent to reign peacefully, she had reason to believe that no obstacle would be put in the way of her return to France, and that she would have no objection to appear there again, as she had always had a liking for the French. The resolution which had been taken of separating the young prince from his worthy governess began to manifest itself in complaints which were made against Madame de Montesquieu. It was said that she was guilty of having spoken to the young prince of the future which would be the result to him of his father's enterprise. Mr. de Beausset was in consequence commissioned to see Colonel Montesquieu and to point out to him how very necessary it was that his mother should be careful about what she said. So great was the supervision to which she was subjected. A very superfluous recommendation, seeing that Madame de Montesquieu was prudence itself. She had no difficulty in convincing the Empress that she was not inconsiderate enough to disturb a young child's mind with untimely revelations, the gravity of which he could not appreciate, and to say things to him which were calculated to excite him in a manner likely to injure him physically as well as mentally. The state of the Countess de Brignol's health continued a cause for serious anxiety. On March 11th, she had several severe fainting fits, in consequence of which Madame de Montesquieu induced her to receive the last sacraments. At 3 o'clock, the Empress, followed by Madame de Colloredo, Monsieur and Madame Antoine Brignol, and persons of the household, proceeded to the chapel, according to the custom observed in the imperial households. There both she and her suite received lighted tapers, and we followed the priest who carried the Holy Sacrament to the sick woman's room in processional form. We all were present at the prayers and the extreme unction. On our knees, Countess de Brignol edified us all with her piety and her resignation. She asked forgiveness for any injuries that she might have done in a firm and loud voice without either boasting or baseness. After the conclusion of the ceremony, we reconducted the priest back to the chapel in the same procession and in the same order. This scene, touching and imposing at the same time, supported by the sick lady with all her presence of mind, seemed to restore her to strength. On the morrow, she was well enough to receive the Empress and even to converse with each of us with a serenity and clear-headedness that deceived us as to the danger which menaced her. In the midst of this visit, Marie-Louise whispered to Count Neipperg, proposing that they should go and finish a letter, the object of which we did not know till the morrow. The purport of this letter was to declare to Monsieur de Metternich that she had nothing whatever to do with the Emperor Napoleon's plans, and that she placed herself under the protection of the Allies. This declaration, which was immediately communicated to the sovereigns and their plenipotentiaries assembled at the Congress, seemed to have been what they had been waiting for, to decide upon the terms of the manifesto directed against the Emperor. This manifesto was the famous declaration of March 13th, 1815, an incitement to murder, worthy of the days of barbarism. Why need it be added that the terms of this factum, which had been elaborated at the French legation, were found too violent by the Allies themselves, who changed its wording? The Treaty of March 25th following was the application and completion of this manifesto, a veritable document of proscription dictated by fear, by pride, and all the hateful passions exaggerated to their extremist degree. The French plenipotentiary no doubt did not foresee that in stirring up the hatred of the foreigners against France and in provoking the renewal of the Chaumont Treaty, he was preparing the disastrous and humiliating Treaty of Paris of November 20th, 1815, to which, too late, he recognized that it was impossible for him to affix his signature. The Empress appeared sad and afflicted. Her mind was secretly agitated by a fluctuation of painful feelings and reflections. She had not enough confidence in Madame de Montesquieu or in me to unbosom herself to us without reserve. She had even made a remark, so I was assured at the time, which I did not think it right to pass over in silence. She is said to have said, if I were sure that I have not been blamed for not going to the island of Elba, ... Then, without giving full expression to her thought, to have added, but I am surrounded by people here who, to be sure, have not missed the opportunity of accusing me. No misunderstanding of these words was possible to me. I accordingly took the first opportunity that presented itself to complain of the bad opinion which she had of me. If she deemed me capable of abusing the honorable hospitality which she was according me to play the part of informer. I told her that nobody better than myself knew the desire which she had always had to join the emperor, and that events alone, the severe watch which was held over her person, and the precautions with which she was surrounded had not left her free to obey what she had considered a duty. What motive, I added, could I have had to lack in the respect which I owed to her? When she had spoken of the emperor, was it not always with the remembrance of the consideration and affection which she admitted to have always found in him? I took advantage of the opportunity to express to her my regret for the declaration which she had made some days before and which had been turned to so bad a use by the Congress. I exhorted her in the most pressing manner to sign nothing which might engage her either to the Allies or against the Emperor. It seemed to me the only attitude which she could assume in the vexatious position in which she found herself. She listened to my advice without impatience and told me that she saw its prudence. That if I was alluding to the declaration of March 13th, she regretted as much as I did that it was a declaration of unparalleled violence, and that the Allies in the future would regret having allowed themselves to give way to it. But she added that she was no longer mistress of her actions, that she had promised her father to place herself entirely in his hands, and that to conduct herself only in accordance with his advice, that she could not, without breaking her word or failing in her duty towards her father, thenceforward her son's only guardian, to whom she showed constant affection, oppose anything that he might wish to do, not only in her personal, but in their common interest. That the Austrian princesses were mere instruments in the hands of the head of their house, that she had been brought up in the principle of absolute submission to this authority, that she was no longer an independent sovereign, that she was without protection and incapable of resistance, that she could but yield under the yoke which would be put upon her or openly rebel against her father and her family, that I could imagine what would be the consequences of such rebellion on her son's future, that she had been born under a fatal star, and that she was doomed never to be happy. The thought that Napoleon's son was in the hands of people who were devoted to his father filled the masters of Europe with anxiety. The Emperor of Austria declared to his daughter that the sovereigns desired that, under the existing circumstances, the young prince should reside in Vienna. On March 18th, the Empress, on her return from Vienna, whither she had taken her son to see the Emperor Francis, sent word to Madame de Montesquieu to prepare to take the young prince back to reside in the Palace of Vienna and occupy the apartment of the hereditary prince. In consequence of this order, arrangements were made for going to Vienna on the second day following the sad anniversary of a great day, when this dear object of the wishes and hopes of a great and powerful nation had come to the light of day. Who could have foreseen that 4 years later he would be in Vienna, a new Astyanax, a prisoner to the coalition, and that he would suffer the fate from which his father had tried to preserve him? On the 19th, the Empress, returning from Vienna, went to her son's apartment and informed Madame de Montesquieu of the wish expressed by the Emperor of Austria, inviting her to get ready to start at 8 in the evening, without mentioning the reasons which rendered this sudden departure necessary. At the hour mentioned, she entered the carriage with Madame de Montesquieu and her son and accompanied them to the imperial palace, where she left them. On her return to Schönbrunn, the Empress informed me that she had been forced to write her father to place her son and herself under his protection, that the necessity of this step had been imperiously pointed out to her, that the Emperor Francis was determined to assure the succession to the states of Parma to his grandson, and would ask the King of France for his consent to this arrangement as the price of the efforts made to maintain him on this throne. In the meanwhile, the Austrian cabinet availed itself of the step taken by Marie Louise to order the administration of the duchies in her name, but on behalf of Austria, on the pretext that the Emperor Napoleon might send a governor into these states to take possession of them in the Empress's name. Prince de Benevento Talleyrand was an object of so much suspicion in Vienna that all his actions were supposed to be dictated by double and contradictory motives. On the one hand, it was said that informed of the progress which Napoleon was making in France, and knowing that a decree issued from Lyon accepted him from the amnesty. He had the idea of making his way to London, where his niece would have followed him with her children, and the Duchess of Corlin, but that his favorite principle of awaiting events had prevented him from carrying this plan into execution. On the other hand, known as he was as the man most inconsistent in his fidelity, it was supposed that he had come to a secret understanding with Napoleon. It was added that it had been proposed in Congress to put his papers under seal. On March 27th, after having received a special messenger who had been sent to him from Paris, Monsieur de Talleyrand announced that he was closing his house and that his mission was terminated. Of the 4 French plenipotentiaries, Monsieur de la Tour du Pin left Vienna, Prince de Benevento, Duke d'Alberg, and Count Alexis de Noailles remained there until further orders. Monsieur de Talleyrand duly left a few days after the various deeds of the Congress had been signed. Monsieur de la Thénardier had separated himself from Monsieur de Talleyrand towards the end of April. He had returned in the beginning of May to Paris, and everything that he said there seemed calculated to create discouragement. In order to hide the real motive which had brought him back to Paris, he pretended to blame Monsieur de Talleyrand. His real motive was to keep the latter acquainted by letter with what was going on. I had had frequent opportunities of seeing this person in Vienna. I had found him exceedingly badly disposed towards the emperor and towards the army, and in general very hostile to the acts of the imperial government. He seemed unable to speak on this subject without giving way to the most violent tirades. On his arrival in Paris, Monsieur de la Thénardier put himself at Fouché's disposal and became his tool. Fouché chose him as one of the commissioners who were charged to negotiate for the armistice with the generals of the enemy after the Battle of Waterloo. In this capacity, he was sent with Generals Valence and Andriossi, and Messieurs Thénardier's exaggerated opinions were well known, and although only a fortnight previously he had been attached to the royal legation at the Vienna Congress, Fouché insisted on his choice. He answered any objections which were made on this score with the remark that the commissioners would want a man who was acquainted with diplomatic forms. The mention of this fact dispenses with any considerations. I have neglected to say in what capacity Monsieur de la Thénardier was in Vienna. Before the Restoration, he had been head of the Northern Division at the Ministry of Exterior Relations. At the time when political direction was divided into 2 divisions, a northern and a southern, appointed counselor of state, he had been attached to Prince de Benevento's mission. On his return from Vienna, Monsieur de la Thénardier attained in September 1815 in recompense for his loyal services to the Bourbons a very large pension and retired to an estate which he possessed in Touraine, where he died, leaving a fortune of 1 million. His retirement was on the pretext of his health, for which he took the most extraordinary care. This imaginary invalid never traveled without being accompanied by his doctor, his sister, and his dog.